Tommy Brooks adjusted the rearview mirror and took a deep breath. The city lights blurred past as he drove through the quiet streets, the hum of the engine the only sound keeping him company. It was just after midnight, his usual time to start work. He had been driving a taxi for over 10 years now, ever since the publishing company he once worked for shut down. Back then, he had dreams of writing novels, of telling stories that mattered. But life had a way of wearing those dreams down. Now he just drove. He picked up late-night workers, partygoers, and sometimes people who didn't even know where they were going. He listened to their music, their laughter, their silence. But rarely did anyone talk to him. And honestly, Tommy didn't mind. Talking meant connection. Connection meant feeling things he had long stopped allowing himself to feel. His wife, Sarah, had passed away 5 years ago. A sudden illness. No warning. Just gone. Since then, everything felt like it was moving in slow motion. His sister Maggie tried to pull him out of it, inviting him for dinners, reminding him that life still went on. But Tommy kept drifting, like a boat without an anchor. He lived alone in a small apartment above a laundromat, ate microwave meals, and spent most of his days behind the wheel. It wasn't living. It was surviving. Tonight was supposed to be like any other night. Drive, drop off, repeat. But fate had other plans. As he pulled up at a dimly lit street corner, he saw her. A girl. Young. Maybe 17. She stood alone, hugging her backpack like it was the only thing holding her together. Tommy rolled down the window. "Where to?" he asked, voice flat from years of monotony. She looked at him for a moment. Eyes tired, shoulders heavy. Then whispered, "Just drive." Something about the way she said it made Tommy pause. This ride was going to be different. Tommy glanced at the girl in his rearview mirror as she climbed into the back seat. She was small, not just in size but in presence. Like she was trying to take up as little space as possible. She wore a simple hoodie, the sleeves pulled over her hands, and carried a worn-out backpack that looked heavier than it should be. Her dark hair fell over her face as she sat down, hiding her eyes. "Buckle up," Tommy said, more out of habit than anything else. She obeyed without a word. He pulled away from the curb, the tires rolling softly over the quiet street. "So," he started, trying to be polite. "Where am I taking you?" There was a pause. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "Doesn't matter." Tommy frowned slightly but didn't push. He had picked up plenty of quiet riders before. Stressed workers, tired students, people who just wanted to be left alone. But this felt different. He caught another glimpse of her in the mirror. She was staring out the window, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Not scared, not angry, just empty. It made something stir inside him. A feeling he hadn't felt in years. Concern. He tried again, softer this time. "You okay back there?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a shaky breath and whispered, "Yeah." But the way she said it, like she was convincing herself more than him, told him otherwise. Tommy didn't know what to do. He wasn't good with emotions. Hell, he barely dealt with his own anymore. So he stayed quiet too. The city passed by in silence. Neon lights flickering on wet pavement. People laughing outside a late-night diner. Music drifting from a passing car. Everything seemed normal. But in his taxi, something was wrong. Very wrong. And for the first time in a long time, Tommy actually cared. He glanced at her again. Still silent. Still curled in on herself. Still hurting. And then, without warning, he saw it. A single tear slipped down her cheek. Then another. And soon, the silence was broken by soft, shaking sobs. Tommy's chest tightened. This ride was no longer just about getting somewhere. It was about saving someone. And he had no idea how to do that. Tommy's hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. He had seen a lot in his years as a taxi driver. People arguing, crying, even breaking down completely. But something about this girl made it feel different. This wasn't just sadness. This was pain. Real, deep, and heavy. He glanced at her again through the rearview mirror. Her face was buried in her hoodie now, shoulders shaking with each quiet sob. He couldn't ignore it anymore. Without thinking, Tommy signaled and pulled into a quiet side street. He turned off the engine and sat still for a moment. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Then gently he spoke. "Hey," he said, voice softer than usual. "You want to talk about it?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she wiped her face with the sleeve of her hoodie and took a shaky breath. "I'm fine," she whispered. Tommy didn't believe her. He turned slightly in his seat so he could see her better. "You don't have to lie," he said. "Not to me." She looked up then, just a little, and met his eyes in the mirror. For the first time, he saw them clearly. They were tired, red-rimmed, full of something broken. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "For what?" Tommy asked. "For being like this." She sniffled. "I know you just want to drive. I shouldn't be making this weird." Tommy shook his head. "It's not weird," he said. "And you don't have to apologize for hurting." That seemed to crack something open inside her. Another tear rolled down her cheek. Then another. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "You wouldn't understand." Tommy studied her for a long moment. He could have left it at that. Could have started the car again, driven her home, and gone back to pretending he didn't care. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she looked at him. Like she was hoping someone, anyone, might finally see her. Or maybe it was the memory of how he once felt. Lost, alone, like no one would ever notice if he disappeared. So instead of driving on, he said something he hadn't said in years. "Try me." The girl blinked, surprised. Tommy gave her a small, encouraging nod. "If you want to talk," he added, "I'm here." Silence filled the car again. But this time it didn't feel empty. Felt like waiting, like space, like hope. And slowly, she began to speak. The girl took a deep, shaky breath. Then, in a quiet voice, she began. "I don't know where to start," she admitted. I just feel like I'm failing at everything." Tommy stayed silent, giving her the space to continue. "My parents, they're always pushing me to be perfect. Straight A's, college prep, extracurriculars. It never ends." She hugged her backpack tighter. "Sometimes I feel like I'm not even a person to them, just a checklist." Tommy nodded slowly. She looked out the window for a moment before continuing. "I used to love school. I loved writing. I wanted to be a writer one day. But now, it feels like every time I do something good, it's never enough." Her voice cracked slightly. "I try so hard to make them proud. But no matter what I do, it's never enough." Tommy felt a tightness in his chest. He had never been a parent, never raised a child, but he understood pressure. He knew what it felt like to carry expectations that were too heavy to bear. "You ever feel like you're disappearing?" she asked suddenly. Tommy blinked. "What do you mean?" "Like, inside, you're screaming, but no one hears you," she whispered. "Like you're trapped in your own life, and no one even knows it." Tommy swallowed hard. "Yes," he said quietly. "I felt that way." She looked at him then, really looked. Like maybe, just maybe, he understood more than she thought. There was another pause. Then she spoke again, softer this time. "A few months ago, I tried to end it." Tommy's breath caught. He didn't move, didn't speak, just listened. "I took pills," she said, voice barely audible. "I didn't want to die forever. I just wanted the pain to stop, even if just for a little while." Tears welled up in her eyes again. "No one knows," she whispered. "Not my friends, not my parents, not even my best friend." Tommy felt his hands tighten on the steering wheel. He had lost someone once, Sarah, and he knew how much pain could grow when no one saw it coming. He turned slightly in his seat. "Did you call someone?" he asked gently. "Afterward." She shook her head. "I called a suicide hotline once, but no one answered. So I just got into your taxi." Tommy stared at her. That's why she called a ride. Not to go somewhere, but to find someone who might hear her. And somehow, fate had put her in his car. He didn't know what to say at first, so he just looked at her, really looked, and said the only thing that mattered. "I see you." She blinked back tears. And for the first time in a long time, she looked like she believed it. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Tommy stared out the windshield, the city lights blurred by the silence between them. His chest felt tight, not with pain, but with something deeper. Recognition. He had been where she was. Not exactly, he hadn't taken pills or called a hotline, but he understood what it meant to feel like no one saw you. To carry a weight so heavy it made you question whether life was worth living. Finally, he turned to her. "I almost ended my life too," he said quietly. The girl, Lena, looked at him surprised. Tommy took a slow breath and continued. "It was after Sarah died," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know how to live without her. Everything felt pointless." He glanced at her. "I used to write," he admitted. "That was my escape, my way of making sense of the world. But after she was gone, I couldn't even look at a blank page." Lena listened, eyes wide with understanding. "One night," Tommy went on, "I stood on a bridge in the rain. I don't even remember how I got there. I just showed up, like my body knew what I wanted before my mind did." He swallowed hard. "I was ready to jump." Lena's breath caught. "But then," Tommy said, "someone stopped me." She leaned forward slightly. "An old man," he said with a small smile. "Just some stranger walking his dog. He didn't yell, didn't try to talk me down like they do in movies. He just said, 'I see you.' And somehow, that changed everything." Tears welled up in Tommy's eyes. "That was the last time I cried," he admitted. "Until tonight." Lena blinked back tears of her own. Tommy turned toward her fully. "I thought I'd lost that part of me," he said. "The part that feels things, that cares." He gave her a small, grateful smile. "But you reminded me it's still here." Lena looked down at her hands, then whispered, "I didn't think anyone would ever understand." Tommy reached for the keys and started the engine. "You're not alone anymore," he said gently. Then, without another word, he pulled back onto the road. But this time he wasn't just driving. He was guiding, protecting, caring. And for the first time in years, Tommy felt like he mattered again. Tommy kept driving, but he didn't head straight to Lena's address. Instead, he took a slow route through the city, past the glowing skyline, the quiet parks, and the late-night diners where people sat alone with their thoughts. He glanced at her in the mirror. She was still curled up, arms wrapped around herself, but her breathing had steadied. The tears had stopped, at least for now. "You want to keep talking?" he asked gently. Lena nodded slightly, so Tommy kept driving, and she kept speaking. "I used to think I was the only one who felt like this," she admitted. "Like I was broken or something." Tommy shook his head. "You're not broken." Lena looked out the window. "Then why does it feel like I am?" "Because pain makes us feel that way," Tommy said. "But it doesn't mean it's true." They passed under a streetlight, its glow briefly lighting up the car. "I just don't know how to stop feeling so tired all the time," Lena whispered. Tommy thought about how to respond. Then he said, "You don't have to fix everything tonight. You just have to take one step at a time." She turned to look at him. "What if I don't know what that step is?" "That's okay," Tommy said. "Sometimes, the first step is just asking for help." Lena was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "Do you think things can get better?" Tommy smiled softly. "I do, because they already are." She tilted her head slightly. He pointed at himself. "You made me remember how to feel again." Then he pointed at her. "And I think I'm starting to make you believe there's still hope." Lena let that sink in. For the first time in weeks, maybe even months, she didn't look completely lost. Just hopeful. The city lights flickered outside as they drove on. The silence no longer heavy, but peaceful. This ride wasn't long in distance, but in heart, it was the longest, most important ride either of them had ever taken. The city passed by in soft lights and quiet streets. Tommy kept driving, not because they had somewhere to be, but because Lena wasn't ready to stop talking, and he wasn't ready to stop listening. She looked out the window for a long time before finally speaking again. "I didn't just call a taxi because I was sad," she said quietly. Tommy glanced at her in the mirror. I called you because I didn't want to die alone. His breath caught. Lena's voice trembled as she continued. I thought, if someone else was there, even a stranger, maybe it would feel less scary. Like I wouldn't be disappearing into nothing. Tears welled up in her eyes again. But then you stopped the car. And you said you saw me. Tommy swallowed hard. And that made me feel like maybe I wasn't already gone. He didn't speak right away. He just let her words settle between them. Then he said, I'm glad you got into my cab. Lena gave a small, shaky smile. I used to think no one would ever understand what I'm going through, she whispered. But somehow you do. Tommy turned slightly in his seat. Because I've been where you are, he said gently. And I know how much it hurts. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. But I also know something else. What? Lena asked. That you're not weak for feeling this way, Tommy said. You're strong for surviving it. Lena blinked back tears. You don't have to fix everything tonight, he added. You don't even have to fix everything tomorrow. But you can start. She nodded slowly. I want to, she said softly. I just don't know how. Tommy smiled kindly. That's okay, he said. You don't have to figure it all out alone. That's why help exists. Friends, family, counselors, people who care. Lena looked down at her hands. I've never told anyone about the pills, she admitted. Not even my best friend. Tommy nodded. That's okay too. You told me now, and that matters. She looked up at him. I guess I needed someone to hear me, she said, even if I didn't know how to ask. Tommy gave her a warm, reassuring look. Well, he said, you found someone. Lena let out a slow breath, almost like she was finally releasing something heavy. Then she whispered, Thank you. Tommy smiled. You're welcome. Outside, the city kept moving. People walking, cars passing, life going on. But inside the taxi, something powerful had shifted. Two lost souls had found each other. And in that moment, neither of them felt so alone anymore. Tommy pulled up in front of a small, quiet house on the edge of town. Lena looked out the window and let out a slow breath. This is it, she said softly. Tommy nodded. You okay? She thought about it for a moment, really thought. Then she said, I think so. He turned slightly in his seat to face her. You did something brave tonight, he said gently. Talking, trusting someone. Lena gave a small smile. Thanks for not just driving me home. Tommy chuckled. That wouldn't have been much of a ride, would it? She laughed a little, the first real one he had heard from her. Then she hesitated before asking, Will I see you again? Tommy smiled. If you want to. She nodded. I do. Good, he said. Because I want to check in on you. Make sure you're doing okay. Lena looked touched. I'll be okay, she said, more to herself than anything. I really will. Tommy handed her a small piece of paper, his phone number written in neat handwriting. If you ever need to talk, he said, you call me, even if it's just to say hi. Lena took the paper carefully, like it was something precious. Thank you, she whispered. Then, slowly, she opened the door and stepped out into the cool night air. Before closing the car door, she looked back at him. Tonight changed things, she said. Tommy gave her a warm nod. I know. And with that, she walked toward the house. Tommy watched until she was safely inside. Then he sat in silence for a moment, letting everything sink in. Something inside him felt different, like a part of him that had been asleep for years had finally woken up. The next morning, Tommy called Lena's school. He didn't give his name, just asked to speak with someone who could help. I don't know if anyone knows this, he said quietly, but there's a girl named Lena who needs support. She's strong, but she's hurting. Please make sure someone checks in on her. The person on the other end promised they would. Later that day, Lena met with a counselor. At first, she was nervous. But once she started talking, really talking, something shifted. For the first time, she wasn't hiding. She told them about the pressure, the loneliness, the night in the taxi. And instead of brushing it off, they listened. They cared. By the end of the session, Lena left feeling lighter. Not completely healed, but on the path. Meanwhile, Tommy sat at a small cafe, journal open in front of him. He hadn't written in years, but today he picked up his pen and wrote the first sentence. Last night, I met a girl who reminded me why words still matter, and somehow healing had begun for both of them. Weeks passed, and life began to shift for both Tommy and Lena. First, it was small things. Lena started therapy. She talked more with her best friend, slowly opening up about how she had been feeling. It wasn't easy. Sometimes the words stuck in her throat, but each time she shared a piece of her pain, it felt lighter. And every few days, she would receive a text from Tommy. "How are you doing today? Just checking in. Proud of you for keeping going." They were simple messages, but they meant everything. She knew someone saw her, someone cared, and that made all the difference. Tommy, too, found himself changing. He still drove his taxi at night, but now he looked forward to his rides differently. He didn't just see them as jobs. He saw them as chances to connect, even if just for a few minutes. One evening, after dropping off a passenger, he sat in a quiet parking lot and pulled out his journal again. He had filled nearly half of it since that night with Lena. Each page held pieces of his past, memories of Sarah, the grief he had buried, the years of silence he had lived through, but also new thoughts, new hope. That weekend, he visited his sister Maggie. She noticed the change right away. "You look different," she said, studying him over coffee. Tommy smiled. "I feel different." Maggie raised an eyebrow. "What happened?" He told her about Lena, about their conversation, about how she had reminded him that he still had something to give. Maggie listened quietly, then reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. Tommy blinked back tears. A few days later, he walked into a local crisis center. He hadn't planned to go, not really, but something inside him pushed him forward. He asked if they needed volunteers. The woman behind the desk smiled warmly. "We always need people who listen," she said. So Tommy signed up. He started small, answering phones, listening to people talk through their pain just like someone once listened to him. It wasn't easy. Some nights, he came home emotionally exhausted. But for the first time in years, he felt alive. Like he mattered. Like he was doing something that truly helped. Meanwhile, Lena kept growing stronger. She joined a school writing group, rediscovering her love for storytelling. One day, she sent Tommy a short story she had written, based on their night together. He read it twice. Then he called her. "You're good," he said honestly. "Really good." Lena laughed. "Thanks." Tommy paused before adding, "You've got something important to say." She grew quiet. "I think I do," she whispered. In that moment, they both realized something. Their paths had crossed for a reason, not just to save each other, but to remind each other that healing was possible, that purpose could be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes, all it took was one person saying, "I see you," to change everything. Months passed. Spring turned to summer, and the city streets buzzed with life. Tommy still drove his taxi at night, but now he also volunteered at the crisis center 3 days a week. He had become one of their most trusted listeners, calm, patient, and deeply understanding. Lena continued therapy and found her voice again through writing. She even won a school award for a short story she wrote, based on the night she met Tommy. One afternoon, they met for coffee at a small cafe near the river. It was the first time they had seen each other in person since that night in the taxi. "You look good," Tommy said as Lena slid into the seat across from him. She smiled. "So do you." They ordered drinks, then sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Lena spoke. "I don't think I ever really thanked you," she said softly. Tommy shook his head. "You don't have to." "But I want to," she insisted. "Because you saved me." Tommy looked at her carefully. "No," he said gently. "You saved yourself. I just reminded you that you were worth saving." Lena blinked back tears. "I used to feel like no one would notice if I disappeared," she admitted. But you noticed. Tommy gave her a warm smile. I did, he said. And I always will. There was a pause before Lena added. I used to think people only helped others because they had to, like it was some kind of job. Tommy nodded. Sometimes it is. But not with you, she said. You didn't help me because you had to. You helped me because you understood. Tommy reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. That's what makes us human, he said. We see each other. We care for each other. Even when we don't have to. Lena smiled, eyes shining. I used to feel invisible, she whispered. But you made me feel seen. Tommy's chest tightened. And you, he said, made me feel alive again. They sat there for a while, sipping their drinks, watching people walk by. They weren't friends in the usual sense. They weren't family in the traditional way. But they were something deeper than both. They were lifelines, each other's reminder that healing is possible, that connection matters, that sometimes the most unexpected people come into our lives and change everything. And as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light over the cafe, one thing was clear. Their bond wasn't built on romance or obligation. It was built on something stronger, understanding, compassion, hope, and above all, love beyond words. This story isn't just about a taxi ride. It's about the moment two lost souls found each other in the quietest part of the night. About how one conversation can change everything. How a stranger's kindness can become a lifeline. And how healing often begins with someone simply saying, I see you. No matter how alone you feel, someone somewhere might be ready to listen. All it takes is one step, one voice, one heart reaching out in the dark.